Welcome back, everybody. Hello.
Hi.
This is Lydia and Ben.
As per usual.
And today we are joined by a special guest, Lily. Hi, Lily.
Hi guys, how are you?
Lily is a health psychologist and a trainee psychotherapist, and she works primarily as a perinatal doula, so birth and postpartum, and she specializes in the area of perinatal mental health. So we're here to talk today a little bit about mental health in pregnancy and the postpartum time. And I guess we felt that this was really important because in this series that we've been doing about pregnancy and birth and beyond and all those times, whilst it's lovely to talk about all the fluffy things like birth, about like baby massage and pregnancy yoga and all those nice things, we felt that it's really important to also have those tough conversations, the ones that maybe are more uncomfortable to have and maybe that aren't really highlighted enough in general media because they're not aspirational, one would say. But what my experience certainly of working within the field of pregnancy and birth is that it's really common, not just postnatally, but also during pregnancy for people to have mental health issues. Isn't that the case?
It absolutely is the case. And, you know, sometimes people would have different mental health issues before pregnancy, and then that would be a risk factor for developing other things or for it to keep going during pregnancy and then in the postpartum period. But it is also very normal to have issues arriving during pregnancy. There's all the hormonal changes, there's also everything changing around you in your body and in your sort of environment, and you're getting ready for welcoming a new life into your life. And, you know, sometimes it's not something that you planned for. It mightn't be something that you feel like you're at the right place in your life for. And it's just a lot of adjustment.
And do you think, are most women caught by surprise with the level of struggle that they have?
Oftentimes that is the case, and then it seems to be the issue that it's hard to find the people you can talk to and you can turn to, just because of what you said as well, that it is sort of painted with these like paint brushes that are all pink and all the sparkles and everything, and you're pregnant and you're waiting for this bundle of joy, and sometimes you're pregnant and then you have all sorts of issues, and sometimes the morning sickness doesn't go away, and sometimes you feel like you can't connect to your baby and you're just not quite happy about baby, and there's all the guilt coming already, and that just goes on and on and on, and it's really difficult to sort of name these things when your expectations aren't realistic and you're just facing all this pink world and everyone is assuming that you're having an amazing time and you mightn't.
I think something that came up for me when I was pregnant, I have a son who's 6, was that, and this is talked about a little bit, but I feel like it's not really highlighted enough, is that as a woman, through our general life, unless you're kind of living under a rock, we are exposed continually to body image issues that are coming up. We're being told it's better if you're thinner, it's better if you're fitter, it's better if you're staying healthy with your diet, all these things. And so we're constantly struggling with body issues. And then suddenly we get pregnant and it's this time where you, no matter what happens, you're going to go bigger. Like you can't stop that. And I wanted a baby. I've worked in birth and pregnancy. I didn't have particularly bad physical self-image issues, but still, it is surprising that when your body starts getting bigger and you know there's no way that it's going to stop getting bigger, it is only going to get bigger and you have no control over it whatsoever. It's not like you can suddenly start dieting or eating more healthy or exercising. And you're supposed to be loving it and taking loads of photographs of your bump and how great you're feeling. You do suddenly feel like, God, I'm not prepared for the feelings that come with this and the overwhelm. And a lot of that is in the early days when people might not even know you're pregnant. And I really certainly felt that even being someone who was really open, I didn't know who I could talk to about it because I felt like it was a ridiculous thing to think. Like it felt stupid in my head. I was like, I shouldn't be worrying about this. And yet it was really alarming to feel, oh my God, I'm going to get bigger. And how is my partner going to relate to me? And what is my body going to look like afterwards? And I think that's an issue that must come up for lots of women.
It does. And you're naming something very important about having no control over what is happening to your body. So during pregnancy, you sort of have to get into the mindset of letting go and just allowing things to happen. And that is very difficult for a lot of people, especially for women who were maybe focusing on their careers and they were used to meeting deadlines, being productive, getting feedback, knowing what they're doing, being in control all the time. And then there comes pregnancy, where your body is doing its own thing. There's a little baby growing in you. And then you're looking at birth that's coming closer and closer. You can't do anything about it, and you can plan for it, but it still won't go the way you want it, probably. So it is a really difficult time in that sense, and that sort of lack of control that people might be feeling can relate to their bodies, and they're getting bigger and bigger. And the way sort of your brain is thinking of your body and sort of where you're at and your perception of your own body, and as you're growing, your brain doesn't quite know how to keep up. So that's when sort of around the middle of the pregnancy, you would start noticing that you're bumping into things all the time. And it's not just your baby bump, it's just your shoulders and your whole body everywhere. You're just like funny in space, and sort of your balance is a bit off. And it's just, everything is just so weird around your body, and your brain is trying hard to catch up, but it's really difficult. And especially if you had any issues around your body before, that can be really triggering.
And how do you work with that? Like when you have those sorts of body issues, what's your approach to coaching or supporting women to try to adapt their mindset around that?
I think it's really important to get comfortable with our own bodies, and a lot of people sort of live in their heads and try to think about solutions and think about things that are happening and not feel those things. So any sort of methods or techniques that are related to the body are really good. So even just anything, say yoga, where you would learn how your body is working, you would learn breathing, you would slow down, and you would get comfortable with what's happening. So any sort of anything that makes you drop into your body instead of staying up here is really good. So it can be any kind of relaxation, meditation, and if you don't want to go that far, you can always just sort of start with a body scan maybe, or just stopping, sitting down, putting your feet on the ground and seeing, how am I feeling in my body? And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit tight around here. What do I do about it? You don't have to do anything about it. It's just like stopping, seeing what is happening for you, and just accepting it. Okay, I'm feeling this way. I take a few deep breaths and I see where I am, and I can keep going. It doesn't have to be, a big, like special kind of meditation. It's just sort of teaching the brain to keep checking in with the body and staying with the feeling instead of thinking and solving.
Yeah.
I think that in pregnancy class, and now it's different, of course, because everything's done by Zoom, and it's less, I find that Zoom is a less open forum for communication than in the classroom setting. What people really attach to is the bit at the beginning where we are sitting in a circle anyway in the class, but each woman got a chance to say their name and say, and maybe I would bring a different topic each time. So it could be, have you chosen a name for your baby? Or it could be, how are you feeling? And they would have an opportunity to say how they were feeling. And sometimes I felt like it didn't really matter what yoga we did, other than the fact that they had a forum to go, I'm actually just having a really shit day, and I feel shit about myself, and I'm tired all the time, and I didn't think it was going to be like this, and I just feel gross. And then to hear the other moms go, oh God, I really feel that too. And just to know, okay, so it's not always, and for some people, of course, they have the easiest pregnancy in the world and it is all beautiful and roses and flowers. But for lots of people, it isn't that. And especially, like you're saying, if they are working really hard and working in a male energy environment, it's very hard to shift from being in work in that goal-oriented, focused, achievement-based energy to suddenly coming to yoga class and being all like, my body just feels really this way. It's hard to make that switch. And I think it's interesting that you brought up that thing about the mind has trouble catching up with the body changing in space, because certainly what I notice as a teacher is in pregnancy yoga, I as a teacher have to do all the poses all the time, because if I stop, like if I even scratch my head in the middle, all of them will start scratching their head because they need to follow so much. They find it hard to listen and then integrate that into their body because there's so much going on. And often, I'm always saying this, and Finn's heard me say it a million times, I'll say, if everyone can have your feet, both feet facing forwards, and they'll be like, yeah. and I'm looking at all these feet in different directions, and I'll go, so if everyone can just look down at their feet and just place their feet facing forwards, and everyone's like, yeah, mine is facing forwards. And then I'll even go, and like highlight someone's feet. If you just look and make sure your feet look like a number 11, and they'll still be like, yeah. And it's always amazing as a teacher to go, they really don't know that their feet aren't that way. And that's just me talking about the alignment in yoga, but like that is how our body's going through such a phenomenal change. It's not surprising that we would then struggle with mental health issues, because we're inhabiting an entirely different new body. And we've had years to get used to the other one. Now suddenly we're supposed to be cool with this new one that isn't even staying the same for any length of time.
It changes at incremental rates usually, but this is like this whoop all of a sudden. I mean, this real shock, isn't it? I mean, you think about how people have difficulty with putting on weight in life in general, and that is a creeping thing. Like the shock of that, actually I'd never really thought about it like that. That's a kind of a powerful thing. Do you, like, when you're working with people who have those types of issues, like, what do you encourage them to relate to? Because I mean, you can't change the world, right? The world is still the world. Instagram is still Instagram.
Right.
The male work environment is still the male work environment. How do you make them walk in the world in a different way? Like, that's an almost impossible thing, like to put a bubble around their kind of mentality and their approach to the world, because it's constantly bombarding them with this, no, forget what Lily said, because actually this is what's happening. Like, how do you do that?
I think it is really important to sort of, when you're working with someone, to strengthen their sense of competency, and to sort of make them feel confident in themselves, because that's sort of where everything gets out of control, when you start doubting yourself, and then you look at external sources for reassurance or for information, or for sort of expectations, that you put expectations on yourself based on what you see around yourself. So then it is, the hard part is that everyone has an opinion when you're pregnant, and everyone wants to tell you what to do, and everyone knows better, and everyone has a terrible story that they need to share with you. So a lot of the times you just need to sort of be like, okay, so this is my bubble and this is my space and I want to protect it. So sometimes you might actually just need to say, I don't need to hear that story. I'm okay, you know, or just don't press play on that video that you know you're going to upset you. And also to find those people that you can turn to and you can talk to. And it can be a best friend, it can be a partner, it can be anyone in the WhatsApp group. Most moms now have their WhatsApp group of other moms in their area, and a lot of the times public health nurses help people connect that way, which I think is amazing. And so you don't even need to know those people, you just need to know which issues fit or match with what kind of people, and then have a go-to person as well.
Good for you.
I was listening to Brene Brown podcast on the way in today, and she was talking about leadership, but it was kind of really, for me, I was listening to it from the point of view of getting advice as being a parent. And she was saying how one of the really important things is that when you're trying to lead people that are under you, and you want to create an environment where the best possible outcome is going to happen from your team, you need to make sure that people aren't walking around with armor on them, because when people have armor on them, that shit is really heavy and they're never going to be vulnerable and open and in touch with themselves and open to making mistakes and trying new things and failure. And I think it's a bit like that, isn't it? That because there's this expectation on pregnancy that people should just be so overjoyed to be so lucky that they got pregnant in the first place, and that they should just be loving the idea of being a mother, that you kind of, when you're pregnant, you almost put on that armor to try and protect yourself. And what you're saying is, actually, we need to make a softness around ourselves and an openness instead of an armor to go like, okay, head down, shoulders up, let's just get through this on my own. In fact, we need to go, okay, I'm going to connect in, I'm going to feel open in the heart, and I'm going to check what I'm feeling, and then be vulnerable enough to say, I need help here, or I need support here, or where can I look? And I think that for me, that the hardest thing is, how do we teach that softness when what we are taught to do our whole lives is just buck up, get on with it and just soldier forwards.
Yeah, and say I'm great regardless.
I'm great, I'm fine. You know, and my experience of when I was pregnancy was okay, but postpartum was that when people would say, how are you doing? And I'd go, not great. I'm not having a good time. People
very good that you were able to do that.
Yeah, it was good that I was able to, but I definitely didn't get a response.
Didn't make any friends. Let's just say.
Everyone's just like, okay.
You
just watch it, like, why are they getting smaller or further away? Oh no, everybody's back.
But that was the experience. People didn't want to hear it. They didn't go, oh God, that's so terrible. Like, what can I do to help? They were like, la 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 la, I don't want to hear it. Mm-hmm. And so, like, how can we change that as a society, as friends? If someone's listening to this and they have a friend who's pregnant, who is open about struggling, like, how can we respond to them in a way that's helpful? Are there support groups? Is there an answer that we can give? Is there something that we can do?
There's loads of questions. So as a friend, I think that's sort of where we can make the most difference, because everyone is friends to other people. So if you can just make little changes and provide that environment for certain people around you, then you're making a big difference. And if everyone does that, then it sort of spreads. Support groups are great. It's just that now it is really difficult with COVID to access them, and then some people have the anxiety around Zoom and videos and the technology part of it, or they can't make time for it. So the in-person version is really, really helpful, and any other version would be great as well. But now we mightn't be able to rely on them as much. But just as people who are in touch with friends and relatives and even just people online around us, we can ask those open-ended questions and just listen. We don't have to know the answers. We don't have to be reassuring necessarily. We can just be like, so how are you doing? And then they answer something, and then you can just say, tell me more about that. Or, wow. And if you say, oh, that must be difficult, it mightn't be difficult. Maybe they went through something and that's your assumption. Oh, that must be really difficult and very upsetting. And they're like, oh, I wasn't upset until now, you know? So it's just all the open-ended question and the listening and just being like, okay, I hear you. Okay, just keep telling me. I'll just sit here and I won't walk away, you know? You don't have to have any special skills, just sit with it. And it might be difficult and you might want to solve it and you might want to give advice, but that's usually not what's needed at the time. Okay, I'm right here, and God, wow, okay, you know?
What about if, I mean, sometimes things go to a kind of a darker place, right?
Yeah.
And people, maybe like you were saying, maybe they're carrying some mental health issues into pregnancy to begin with, or maybe just pregnancy for them is just so confronting that they really don't see the way out, and the world starts to close in a way that can be really dangerous. And, you know, for people who are looking in from outside those pregnancies, like friends or family members, like when is it appropriate for them to look for more support, and where should they look for more support for those people who are like in a deeper struggle, let's say?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of the times they would be told to talk to their GP, and that might be a good idea depending on your GP.
Big time depending on the GP. Yeah. Tricky.
Yeah. A lot of the times, especially postpartum, GPs would be very inclined to just prescribe some medication and be like, okay, you just take this twice a day and you'll be sorted. And while medication might be answer to some questions, it's not answer to all questions. A lot of the times when there is an issue, it's good to sort of flag it to maybe the midwife, or whoever you trust in your healthcare provider team, you know. So there are mental health teams in the maternity hospitals, and they're great, and they will accommodate requests, and they will provide opportunity to talk to someone who knows what you're going through. And if further interventions are needed, then they can sort of get you in touch with those people who can then help you later. So that is definitely very good. And then There are psychologists in private practice. There are counselors in private practice that you can turn to if you can afford that, who sort of specialize in these areas. And then a lot of the times it is sort of building your support system and your network as well. So your partner, it's really important that your partner knows what you're going through, because tackling the whole thing by yourself is really difficult, and it can be really alienating and isolating. So just having your partner on board and being like, maybe even just having someone to explain it to them, or have a good resource for them, and be like, this is the situation, this is what I'm going through, this is how you can support me, and this is how we're going to get through this, to sort of have a plan in place and have your support network.
And as a doula, are you that resource? Like, can you explain what your role is? Like, when you're dealing with mental health as a doula, like, how far do you take that conversation?
It's interesting because as a doula and psychologist, I can't be both of them. So when I'm a doula, I'm just a doula. I can't do intervention. I won't diagnose you. It is out of my scope. So if I am your doula, then my job is to provide you with resources, and then to be that listening, accepting environment for you, where you can sort of just like put it out there. And sometimes maybe that's all you need. And sometimes if that's not enough, then I can help you with providing resources. So then you can be like, okay, so I have a few numbers here, and I know who to reach out to if the pressure becomes bigger, or if I start to feel more unwell, or if this isn't quite helping me. And then as a psychologist, it would be a whole different scenario, because a lot of people sort of find comfort in knowing that I'm going to see this person once a week. On Tuesday morning, it is my time. Doesn't matter what I say, it will be okay. And I will have some tools, or I will have a better understanding afterwards. Or maybe I can just let it all out and just name all my fears and my concerns and all the dark thoughts that are coming to me, or all the weird bodily sensations or anything that is happening to you. You can just go there and you can just put it all out there, and then you can walk away. And you know that in a week's time, you can do that again. So there's sometimes great relief in just knowing that someone's going to be there. And it's the same sort of postpartum doula support. Even if I just come in once a week or twice a week, I just see that sometimes there is that sort of tension, and then I arrive and it's just like, oh, and it's literally just having someone there, and everything is slowing down, everything is held, and that sort of holding environment is really important.
And do you find that women who have a tougher pregnancy from a mental health point of view tend to have a tougher time afterwards as well? Or are those two things very separate in terms of the pre and post?
It doesn't necessarily carry on postpartum, but it depends a lot on what kind of support the mother was getting during those times. So if you're struggling and your experience is that there's no one there to help you, then it is unlikely that after birth, when the pressure is higher and there's more to do, and there's a little baby who's very vulnerable and relies on you, that it will get easier, So I think if someone feels supported during pregnancy, then chances are that things can get better after birth. And the hormones are very different as well. So your brain is dealing with different sort of inputs, and the system is different then. So if it was sort of like a hormonal issue, then it can just literally stop after birth.
I think it's important to just say here on the podcast that there is a thing. I mean, everyone knows now that postnatal depression is a thing, and people are kind of taught, look out for it, and here are the signs, and here's when it's serious, and here's when it's less serious. But I feel like no one ever actually says prenatal depression is a thing. You never really hear people like validating it as a thing that's bigger than just, oh, she's a bit sad, or she's a bit tired or something. Mm-hmm. But there is, just to say here for people listening, that there is a hormonal version of prenatal depression that comes on when you get pregnant and can leave when you give birth. And that is just a medical thing. It's nothing to do with your own. You could be someone who's never had any mental health issues ever before, and may never again, but it's brought on by the change in those hormones, right?
Exactly. It is the same with prenatal depression. And then everyone knows about postpartum depression, right? It's like there's been lots of really good work done to spread the word, and now everyone is aware of it, and baby blues and postpartum depression and all that. And then someone might be or experiencing postpartum anxiety or postpartum psychosis, and it's just like, what is that? Or birth trauma or PTSD, and then people are just like, okay, I know about postpartum depression, I've got that. And then the rest is just like, well, my symptoms don't really fit into the postpartum depression thing, but something isn't right. And it can be the same with prenatal depression as well. When you're struggling and things just don't quite work, and you're just not feeling right. And it's really difficult then to reach out for help.
Sorry. Do you see that more on first when women are getting pregnant for the first time? Does it tend to be the case that because they're more used to it, okay, they're familiar with some of the things that are happening to their body, that on the second or third time of getting pregnant that you have less incidence of pre and postnatal depression? Or does that follow any sort of curve?
No, it's not really related, because during your first pregnancy, you're usually much more aware of what is happening because it's all new, and you're really like, oh, all these changes are happening and all this preparation, and you don't quite know what to expect. So you're a bit more in tune with what is happening. While when you have a kid running around you, you might just be like, okay, let's just get things done, and we'll go about our business. So it's much harder, and then you also hopefully have a feeling that, okay, my body has done this before, I know how this works, but then because of that, it might be easier to miss things because you're kept busy, or it might be easier to spot things because maybe first time around it wasn't that way. So it can sort of go both ways.
Yeah, and I think, can we talk a little bit into, you mentioned there postpartum PTSD. Mm-hmm. And birth trauma, and I think that's a really important topic, because so obviously I'm really interested in home birth and natural birthing, and that's the world that I'm in, and I had home birth, and that's what I chose. And one of the reasons that I chose that was because I felt like the birth was really important, and not just for my baby but for me. And I knew that if I had a really positive, empowering birth, that would help me going forwards. And I really believe that. But I think that there's a general belief out there still of, so long as the baby's healthy, the most important thing is that your baby's healthy. And you hear that all the time, that women have these deeply traumatic births where they've had every type of intervention that could possibly have happened, an emergency C-section, and then they nearly died, and all sorts of terrible things. And then people go, but isn't it lucky that your baby's fine? And ultimately the team saved you. So isn't that great?
And it comes from like,
huh?
It comes from a good place, but it doesn't help.
No, and it also kind of devalues their experience, because it's that same thing that we all know. As soon as you give birth to the baby, you've gone your whole pregnancy with everyone. Are you okay? Can I get you a drink? Sit down on the bus, blah, 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 caring about you. And then the moment the baby's born, you don't get asked a single question about how you are.
Exactly.
It's just
all the focus shifts onto baby.
Totally. And I think when people say, oh, isn't it, it's just so lucky that the baby was okay and so everything's great, it again devalues the mother's experience and stops them from being able to go, well, actually, that isn't the most important thing in this situation, because yes, I have a healthy baby, but I am now myself not healthy, either mentally or physically. And how can I go on to parent this child? And if I've got other children too. And that's a real thing. And I think that only now are people starting to go, birth trauma is a valid trauma that needs to be dealt with.
Exactly. I wrote my dissertation this year about birth trauma and how it affects people postnatally, and what sort of interventions are available and whether they are effective. Because a lot of the times in Ireland anyway, you hear that, oh, if you have birth trauma, it's EMD or CBT, and that's just what you should go for. But there's loads of other things, and there's evidence around other interventions as well. It's just sort of not out there, and people don't quite know about it. But the title of my dissertation was "At least you have a healthy baby," because that is just what people say, and this single sentence that just dismisses the whole experience. It's very easy to say that and be like, oh, focus on the good things, while it's really not about that. And if you don't work with what happened, and if you don't give it space and time, then it will sort of just stay there, compressed, and it can just be triggered anytime, and then you can just have this overwhelming reactivation of trauma, again and again and again, until you find a time and a place to work with it and process it. So when we dismiss that experience, and it might be something that doesn't seem violent, or it doesn't seem traumatic at all, it might literally just be no consent and being out of control and being touched and being dealt with in a way that wasn't respectful, and we don't have to understand why things were traumatic for someone else. We just have to respect it, and if there is space for it, it's great. But the way you were talking about vulnerability and having that armor, I don't think the goal is to like push everyone towards vulnerability, because that armor is really, really useful. It is there for a reason. If we were vulnerable at all times, we would get hurt all the time, and we wouldn't have enough capacity to deal with everyday things and to keep ourselves safe. So it is more about the balance. And yes, a lot of people have those armors that can't be moved, and they're nearly just like stuck there. While the healthy version would sort of be finding a balance. Maybe at a workplace, sometimes it is good to have a really strong armor and being like, okay, this is what it is, this is what I want, this is what I can do, and sort of stand up for yourself and being able to say no and all that, just having that strong sense of self. While at other situation, it's really important to be able to vulnerable and be like, I'm struggling with this, or I'm not very good at this, or I need help. And it would be really dysfunctional to bring that into certain situations where you have to just be like, go and get this done. So it's finding the balance between being vulnerable and protecting yourself, and choosing and picking the right situations and the right people, where you can allow yourself to do that, instead of aiming to be this like really open and vulnerable and flexible version of yourself, where your defenses might be down, and then you can get hit really hard.
Yeah, that's a really astute observation, isn't it? It's like, it's really difficult to connect your emotions and assert strong boundaries. Like, with practice, it becomes a tool, but it's not something that you can suddenly start to learn when you're pregnant, I suppose. It's like,
well, you can, but it's about,
but what space?
I mean, I guess it's like, it's the difference between like a warrior mindset and the armor that you've put on, and those two things are subtly different. They might seem like they're in the same wheelhouse, but I guess it's like, when you have a strong armor up, it's like a shield,
but it's an inside to outside shield as well as outside in. It's a two-way problem.
It's a two-way problem. And I think, the question is there a different way? Is there a third way, which is like staying within your power and being able to advocate for yourself and being strong while staying connected to yourself and staying open? And I guess Brene Brown was talking about the difference between power against and power with. And I think it's like that, isn't it? It's like harnessing the power to move together rather than being the stopping force that's the barrier between those two things. But like you said, that's not some skill that you're just going to learn suddenly overnight when you're pregnant. It's like the whole culture of that has to change. And I feel like the culture in the hospital system is very much an against power system, because it's like we're the all-knowing doctors and medics. And don't get me wrong, they save lives and they are experienced. But a woman has, at this specific time in her life when she's pregnant and giving birth, this access to knowledge that's there all the time, but maybe sometimes it only comes to the fore in pregnancy, of having a sense something's wrong or something's right, and they need to be listened to. And I found certainly that my little moments of interactions in the hospital, my experience was completely undervalued. There was no person who was listening to my experience and going, even to the point of me knowing the day that I conceived, there was only one day in the month that I could have conceived. And the machine said, you conceived on this date. And I'm telling them I didn't have sex then. I can't conceive, it's not possible. And they're like, no, your baby's going to be born X date. So I got a due date that was 2 weeks earlier than I knew was my actual due date. And as a result, my baby was really overdue, and then I was pressured and they wanted to induce me and all of this stuff. When I knew in my body and in my dates that just wasn't the case. He had another 2 weeks and he was fine. And so if you're looking at this endemic problem of power against in the system from the very beginning, how can we expect the women within the system to be able to have autonomy, make good choices, trust their bodies, and advocate for themselves when they're put in a position of your doctor knows best?
I think that's a really, really important question that you raised, and questioning the woman's understanding of what is happening in her body does happen very often. And it sort of links in with what we were talking about your body and trusting your body and understanding what is happening in your body. Because if you're sort of trying to catch up and develop an understanding of what is happening and a confidence in your own body and understanding what is happening, and then you get told by the professionals that, oh, you're actually not in labor, or, oh, that's not actually a contraction, or that can't be that painful, you can't be in pain, I can see it on the monitor that it's very mild, that takes away a lot of power. But I think it's also dangerous to sort of paint the system as the enemy, in a sense that when, as a doula, when I prepare with a couple or with a mother, I do make a point of saying that they want the same as you do. They just come in from a different angle. So the goal is the same, and they want to look after you. And they went into that profession because they want to care for women and they want the best outcomes. It's just that the protocols and everything that is happening in the system doesn't quite allow them to. So there's a part where you have to be really strong. And that's why information and evidence and understanding what there's out there and what can happen and where your sort of capability is to influence situations is really important. So it's the emotional preparation for sort of pregnancy and labor and childbirth and the postpartum, and then the informational and the physical. So there's all these changes and all these parts of it that need to be given attention. And I think maybe changing the system is a whole lot to ask, but you can do things bit by bit, and it's the baby steps as well. With when you're saying how do you go from this to that, and how do you implement changes, and how do you work with the armor and the vulnerability part, it always just has to be like baby steps and little changes and gradual things. And in psychotherapy as well, we say that you're not really in danger of just like opening a big can of worms and then what are you going to do with it, because you can only access as much as you can deal with. There are those defenses and there are those mechanisms in place that sort of keep you safe. So sometimes maybe therapy slows down a little bit because you have to keep yourself safe to deal with other areas of your life that need more attention. And sometimes you can go really deep because you're safe enough in your life. So it's always just gradual things, and it's never a massive change or a big sort of a huge evolution.
It's not flicking the switch anyway, that's for sure. Yeah.
Talking of huge changes, can we talk a little bit to the time in history that we are now, which is unique for birthing mothers. It's unique for all of us in all situations, but there are many women that are pregnant now and that are facing a situation of even more unknowns. And depending on when they're going to give birth, no one knows, are we going to be in a lockdown at that particular minute? What are the rules are going to be in the hospital? But lots of women are facing a situation where they're going into labor, first time or otherwise, without the opportunity of having a birth partner or a doula beside them. What are the things that you're either hearing from people as being increased anxieties or fears or worries, or that you can anticipate being the case for people that we could just flag and talk through a little bit?
Yeah, a lot of the times it starts antenatally where the partner isn't allowed in. And that is really difficult if things aren't going perfectly. And then you get news and there's no one to turn to, no one that holds your hands, and the support is just missing. And it is it is a family. It is always a unit. It's not just one person. It doesn't just happen to the mother. So it is really difficult when that separation happens. And especially if there was trauma before, or there was loss, or any history of trauma, then it can be extremely difficult. And a lot of the times it's really difficult to stand up for yourself when it's an emotionally really loaded and intensified situation. So I think it starts antenatally, and we really need to do everything we can to request and push for partners being allowed back. That support is so needed. And then during birth and labor, again, it is really difficult to stand your ground when your job should be to stay within your body. So if you have to think and you have to fight, then you're up here, and it's a whole different, it kicks off a whole different set of hormones, and different things are happening in your body. And obviously then things will slow down, and then interventions happen, and so I think it is an especially difficult situation now. And, there's all those petitions, and they're going around. We need to make sure that we sign them. We need to make sure that if we can talk to TDs to do that, if you can talk to your healthcare provider to do that, if you literally can just talk to people and be like, this is happening nowadays. And although it only affects certain people, it is sort of in everyone's interest to fix this and provide the best environment for families, because it is so important. If the mother isn't feeling right, it will be really difficult for them to care for that baby. Like, we want a healthy family unit that starts with ideally a good relationship, and then a healthy mother, healthy father, or partners, and then we can work with the baby and the triad and the different children in the family, and then the support system. But we can't just sort of pull out different legs and disconnect certain things and then expect the system to keep working properly, because it won't.
I think that's a really interesting point that I actually hadn't really joined the dots up together, to understand that it's hard enough, especially the first time round, to go from the life you've had before, where you're two independent people together in relationship, and suddenly there's a baby and you're pregnant, and then you give birth and you have this baby, and the whole dynamic of your relationship changes. And in many cases, it never quite settles back to the way it was before, or lots of people have struggled trying to integrate family life and their relationship. And that's a common thing that, everybody knows. It's no shock. But I can imagine that it's even harder, because oftentimes the problem is if the woman is nursing the baby, looking after the baby, and then she feels she doesn't have as much support with her partner, and they also don't have that romantic connection anymore, and it's hard to bring that back in. And for the father, it's hard for them to see where their place is and where their role is and how they can be involved. But if from the very first hospital appointment, as the partner, be it man or woman, they're going, I don't get to go to the scan, I don't get to be there to support you, I don't get to be there at the birth, how are they suddenly supposed to, when the baby is handed to them, suddenly go, cool, yeah, I'm now the birth partner, and I am like, that's very hard. It's like we're severing that link at the very first moment. And where is the bonding?
And I hear that very often now, that maybe it's not the first baby, we say it is the second baby. And mothers are saying that my partner wasn't allowed in, he couldn't ask questions, he wasn't as involved, and as a result, now I feel really lonely and my partner feels really alienated, and I just can't imagine him being able to sort of join back. And sometimes postpartum as well, I hear that when partners are they feel distant, and it happens especially when there's a breastfeeding mother and the baby just wants to be close and be fed all the time. There's all the cluster feeding, and the partner can feel left out. And like, they used to think that it is always the mother and baby dyad, but now we know that it is possible to extend it to dad and have 3 parts of have a triangle instead of just a dyad, and they can participate if it comes early enough. And we know that if fathers spend a lot of time with their baby and they get to do skin to skin, or if they just get to hang out together, even if they don't do anything, they are close to each other, then dad's brain gets rewired as well. There's all sort of changes that happens. It's not just the mother's brain that gets all this plasticity and all different skills and focuses in the brain. It's the father's brain as well. All different connections and all different things happening in the body. So then if that happens in the first few weeks, we know that the relationship is more likely to last, and we know that the father will be much more included, and then the child can connect and bond with both caregivers just as much.
Cool. Yeah. So there's never been a more important time for the dad to stay in the thing right the way up. And you as a doula probably have a singular ability to be in that conversation to encourage that type of connection as well, right?
Exactly. And I try to always make a point of having that conversation with the couple. How are you going to work for this relationship? Because it is very normal for all this attention to shift to baby, and there's also so many skills to pick up and so many things to learn, and you need to get to know your baby, and you have to settle into your new role and figure out a whole different lifestyle and sort of routine for yourself. And it's really easy to forget that there is a relationship, and relationships need work. And if there's no attention and you're not feeding the relationship, then it won't quite have the same kind of strength. So you want to strengthen that bond. And a lot of the times I'm like, okay, so what are you going to do? What are the things that you used to enjoy? What can we save? What can we preserve? And how are you going to nurture the relationship? And what plans do you have? And sort of to maybe to find certain times, say every second Sunday, every second and fourth Sunday, or every Wednesday evening, we're going to ask the grandparents to help out. And all we're going to do, we're not going anywhere. A lot of mothers find it difficult to leave their babies with someone. Maybe it's literally just that someone made dinner for you, or you got takeaway and you sit down and you can just chat, and someone else is minding baby. So you're not kind of like looking over and being like, is she okay? Is everything fine? Maybe she needs a feed, or oh, that noise is familiar. You can just sit down and look into each other's eyes and see each other again, and it's not just like, hey mom, hey dad. It's like, hey you, my love, the person that I chose to embark this journey with. So it is so important. But now, if COVID did anything good, it was that a lot of dads are at home now in home office, and okay, they might be upstairs, they might be working away, but they do come downstairs to make a cup of tea, and they hold baby, and mom can have a shower, or they can just chat, they can just give you a hug, they can just mind baby for a while, or loads of meetings where daddies are there, baby in the sling, and they're clicking away and they're chatting. It's like, oh, by the way, I have my baby here with me. and then I hear that, oh, other people are having their babies with them. So yeah, I can just take baby now, and you just enjoy that cup of tea there. And they take pride in being a dad and being and it's now the perception is changing, like participating in family life is becoming
like everything in life, it's like opportunity versus obligation is so often the way, isn't it? Giving them the chance to see, like, this is your moment where you can, if you want to, buy in. And nearly everybody wants those opportunities. It's just that they feel like they're being beaten over the head to come along on the ride. That's when things tend not to go so well, eh?
Yeah, I think it's such a nice thing. And it's really nice to hear that there is an opportunity, that there's a service there in the postpartum doula to support the relationship and nurture the relationship, because I actually haven't heard that said before from a postpartum doula. And I think that that's so key. I mean, I know from my own personal experience, it would have made a fundamental difference in the first few months, and then the ongoing years that followed afterwards for me in my relationship, had someone taken the time to stop and go, you know what, you need to focus on this and you need to make it a priority. And I think largely because I came from a really solid, really strong relationship, I took that for granted because I hadn't had to work at it so much. We had always just been really connected. It wasn't a thing where I thought, oh, we're really gonna have to focus on maintaining that connection. But actually it disappears so quickly when you're never focusing on nurturing that part of it. And it would have been so nice, because we had no family support, it would have been so nice to have someone coming in and actually going, by the way, here, how can we talk about this? How can we make it a priority? And how can I hold you accountable to that too? Like, how can, when I come in next time, go, so did you do that thing? And I think that's a really valuable, it's almost one of the real reasons for people who are listening to go, actually, maybe I do need a postpartum doula, because I think there's also that still that misguided notion of like, I'll be fine postnatal. People have been doing it for centuries. I should just be grand to get on with it. And I'm always saying, please, instead of spending your money on a really expensive buggy, spend it on a postnatal doula. Like, it's going to serve you so much better. And I think it's really key for people to hear that, because if anything that's going to make people buy in, it's going, I know I need to save my relationship. I know I need to feed it, because that's the thing that's the fundamental linchpin of my family's health and happiness going forward.
Happiness is the big thing as well, because you all should be searching for that. Like, I mean, what is the point of the buggy? The buggy makes you mildly happy until they grow out of it 3 months later and you give it to somebody else. Whereas you've chosen a partner for life, hopefully, whatever. But like, they are the thing that's going to fuel the two-way street that gives you all joy. Like, that's what you got romantically involved in. That's why the baby came along in the first place, right?
Yeah. And it's important. Like, there is a reason why most divorces or breakups happen within the first 2 years after baby is born. There's a reason for that. And if we are aware of that, then we can make a decision to make it a priority, as you said. And I think the best time to do that is antenatally, when you know that there is a baby coming, and then you can still make plans instead of being sleep deprived and living on tea and toast and just being a bit frazzled at all times and having a crying baby. And then it's definitely not going to happen. That's not the time to make your relationship a priority, you know. So
the
it's
wrong formula.
Yeah, I heard it said that there was a forum online of people saying, what are the most important questions that you need to discuss with your partner when you're pregnant? And people's answers were like, you know, what cot are we getting? What bug are we getting? Where is the nursery going to be? All of these questions. And then the person was going, no, the questions need to be, you know, what are our roles in this relationship going to be? How do you see yourself parenting? When we have an argument, how will we solve that? What kind of a parent do you want to be? How are we going to discipline our child? And those conversations need to be had at a time where it's not fraught, because it hasn't just happened. It's much harder to have that conversation when you've just had an argument with your child and your partner about the way you both parented that child. Then it's got all this heightened energy. Whereas if you've already gone, hang on, we agreed that what we both wanted was this, and one of us hasn't stuck to that code, it's much easier to have that nuanced conversation in a way that's gentle and curious rather than accusatory.
It's like the family needs a mission statement. Like, every business is taught to have a mission statement. The family needs that moment as well, doesn't it? It's like something to always have, like, okay, well, this is the grounding foundation on which we built this thing. And does whatever conversation we're having now, or what decision we're making now, does it serve that purpose?
And, you know, you don't have to stick to it necessarily. So it always should be flexible. So you can have that conversation again and again and again, but it's good to have a starting point, something that we can build on, something that we can change. And if we want to scrap it and go for something else, as long as we agree on it, it's completely fine. And you will want to do that because you learn new things, and you will get to know your baby. And children are different. They're not like what you expect them to be. They have their own little personalities, and your life will change in ways that you didn't expect it to. So it's important to A, have a starting point, and B, to be okay with changing it.
Yeah. Cool.
Lily, where, if people are listening to the podcast and they're like, she's great, I want her to be my doula, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best place? Do you have a website or a Facebook or what?
Probably via email would be best, and then I do have a Facebook page as well, so I might just send it on and you can put it in the description.
Cool.
Perfect.
We'll do that.
We will do that. Lily, thank you so much for chatting with us. It's been
Thank you for having me.
You're wise beyond your 30 years, fair dues. We were looking at the start and we were like, she's got all these qualifications, but she can't even have time to qualify or practice. So fair dues, it's great. You've some really given us some major insight, lots of food for thought. So
loads of stuff that I've never heard or thought of or had spoken of. And I really, it's so exciting for me that this is going to be a resource for people to come and look at and to reach out for and have those things sparked in their head while they're still pregnant. So hopefully loads of people will listen.
Also, I just wanted to point out that the Doula Association of Ireland do these free consultations where you can just book a 30-minute consultation with a doula. So if you have any questions, say about is home birth for me, or how do I go about getting this or that, or just figuring things out, or my previous birth wasn't the way I wanted it to go to, and whatever. You can just book a consultation and just talk to someone who might have the resources or might have a better idea of where you can turn to. So it's a really good opportunity for parents to just talk to someone and get a bit of support or help or direction if they have questions.
Great.
Thanks
Thank you
so much.
Yeah, amazing. All right, that's it, I guess. I suppose the last thing, just to say thank you so much to our sponsors, to Newzest, our fantastic nutritional partners, to Clearlight, the fantastic builders of my infrared sauna. Let them build one for you. We'll get you a discount. Come along, find our discount codes. You can find them online, find them through our Instagram. DM us if you want more details. I've been giving people testing tasters through our stories of what it's like to have them. They're a major linchpin to my own personal health. And also to Swivel, to the fantastic people who built the little robot that we're filming on now. And thank you so much to you, lastly, Lily. And it's been really fantastic, and I hope to chat to you soon again.
Yeah,
it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.